"Get out. This is my seat. People like you don't belong in first class." The words cut through the cabin sharper than the overhead lights. They weren't whispered. They weren't mistaken. They were thrown like a verdict. And for a moment, the hum of boarding paused. Passengers froze mid-movement, eyes sliding toward row 3, where one woman sat tall and unapologetic, claiming a seat she believed wasn't meant for the man standing in front of her. Victoria Hale. Blonde hair pinned in a deliberate wave, pearl earrings catching the artificial glow, a smile bent into superiority. She held her boarding pass like a dagger, flashing it without waiting for anyone to check. To her, the proof was in her presence. Designer sunglasses still on, a handbag worth more than someone's rent at her side. Every inch of her posture said, "This space belongs to me, not you." And yet, the man she tried to erase didn't move. Marcus Carter. Black hoodie, dark jeans, quiet sneakers. No gold watch, no tailored suit. Just a boarding pass in his hand and an expression that didn't bend. Calm, steady, carved from patience he had carried for decades. He spoke only once. "My seat." 3 Ampere. The cabin inhaled. A murmur rose 2 rows back. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Another passenger reached for a phone, thumb pressing record, the red circle glowing like an alarm. Victoria leaned deeper into the leather seat, voice dripping with mockery. "Sweetheart, you must be lost. Economy is that way. This seat is reserved for real clients, for people who belong." The sound landed heavy. It wasn't just about a chair. It was about place, status, worth. And she wanted the whole cabin to hear it. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply raised his ticket higher, printed clearly. Carter, M. 3 Ampere first class. The attendant arrived, clipboard in hand, already siding with what they thought they saw. "Sir, let's not cause a scene. Please move to another seat, so we can depart on time." Her eyes never touched the ticket. They went straight to Victoria, softening, deferential. "Don't worry, Miss Hale. We'll resolve this." That name Hale passed through the row like a ripple. Some passengers recognized it, an investor's name. Money in the airline. A woman with reach. She smirked, lips curving as though the crew were hers to command. And yet Marcus stood, unmoving, his silence heavier than any outburst could be. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. The air inside row 3 wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. Every breath, every glance, every phone held just a little higher. This wasn't about protocol. It wasn't about seating charts. It was about who the world decided belonged. Victoria thought she knew the answer. Marcus let her believe it. For now, Marcus Carter hadn't dressed down by accident. The hoodie, the jeans, the clean sneakers, they were deliberate. To anyone else, he looked like a quiet traveler boarding a late afternoon flight. To him, it was a test, because Marcus knew how this played out. He had seen it before. At 22, fresh out of grad school, he flew standby for a job interview. Same airline, different decade. He wore slacks and a button-down. The agent at the counter glanced once, then told him the seat had been reassigned. He slept on the plastic chairs of O'Hare that night. At 30, he walked into a regional airport lounge carrying his first business portfolio. Security stopped him at the door, said his pass was fake, asked if the laptop bag was stolen. He had to prove every inch of his existence, while others breezed past. And now, decades later, worth billions. With 25% of Horizon Airlines in his hands, he chose to board this flight alone, unannounced, to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. The cabin around him hummed with whispers. Phones angled higher. One man in row 4 muttered to his wife, "He's too calm. He knows something." She nodded, eyes fixed on the standoff at 3 Ampere. Victoria Hale crossed her legs slowly, an investor's arrogance radiating from the tilt of her chin. She didn't just think the seat was hers. She thought the airline was hers to command. And in a way, she wasn't wrong. Her family held stock small, symbolic, loud. Enough to earn her the kind of treatment that bent rules in her favor. The flight attendant still hovered, eyes darting between Marcus and Victoria, between the boarding pass in his hand and the pearl-studded smile on her face. The choice seemed obvious to her. Defer to the name she knew. Marcus said nothing. His silence was deliberate, heavy, because silence had power. It forced the cabin to hear every other sound: the click of a phone recording, the nervous shuffle of a passenger's shoes, the smug laugh that slipped from Victoria's throat. He could have snapped then. He could have pulled out credentials, revealed who he was. But Marcus had built an empire on patience. He let moments unravel. He let people show who they were when they thought power was theirs. And in that unraveling, he always found the truth. So he stood there, still, ticket steady in his hand. Every second that passed, the divide grew sharper. One side watching a man denied his rightful place, the other side watching a woman revel in it. This wasn't about fabric or leather. It wasn't about a number on a boarding pass. It was about an old lie, the one he had heard since O'Hare, since that airport lounge, since every time someone looked at him and thought, not the type. Now the type was here. Now the cabin would see it for what it was. And Marcus Carter was not moving. The aisle grew narrower, not because the metal walls shifted, but because tension filled every inch of air between Marcus and the crew. "Sir," the attendant repeated, this time with more edge. "We cannot delay boarding. Please move so we can accommodate our VIP guest." Marcus didn't move. His boarding pass remained in his hand, steady as stone. From 2 rows back, a man leaned into the aisle. Gray suit, polished shoes, investment banker confidence. His smirk was casual cruelty. "Buddy, don't hold us up. That seat's already taken. Go find your spot in coach before you embarrass yourself." A low chuckle followed, not from Marcus, but from Victoria Hale, still lounging in the leather as if she were already airborne. "Exactly. He knows he doesn't belong. They always try this: print a ticket, sneak in, cause a scene." Phones tilted higher. A passenger whispered, "She really said that?" The red light of recording blinked brighter, a silent witness. The attendant sighed, frustration painted across her face. "Sir, I'm asking you again. Take another seat, or we'll have to call security." Marcus's voice was calm even. "You're threatening to remove the passenger whose name is printed on 3 here." Victoria rolled her eyes so hard it felt rehearsed. "Anyone can make paper look official. I've been an investor for years. This seat is reserved for people who actually matter to Horizon." The cabin rippled at that word matter. A teenager whispered to his mother, "Did she just say that out loud?" His mother only nodded, pressing her lips into silence. The investment banker chimed in again, smug sharper now. "Look, man, don't make this worse. You think this airline would give that seat to someone dressed like that?" He waved a dismissive hand over Marcus's hoodie and jeans, like the fabric itself disqualified him. Every word wasn't just insult, it was erasure. The air vents above whispered a steady hiss, but the real hum was human discomfort, disbelief, a few mutters of unbelievable. Victoria leaned forward suddenly, as if confiding in the entire cabin. "Security's going to escort him off any minute. You'll see. Horizon doesn't tolerate frauds." Fraud. The word stuck like glass against skin. Marcus still didn't flinch. His stillness unsettled them more than shouting ever could. He had played this game before, and he knew the ending wasn't written by the loudest voice. But to the rest of the cabin, the escalation was clear. A man with a ticket, a woman with entitlement, a crew leaning toward the name they recognized. The storm wasn't breaking yet. It was only gathering. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply breathed. The cabin expected fire defiance, shouting, something they could label disruptive. Instead, they got stillness. A stillness so steady it made the others nervous. The flight attendant shifted her weight, clipboard clutched tighter. The investment banker tilted his head, expecting a fight. Victoria Hale's smirk faltered for a moment, then reformed sharper, like glass pressed against skin. But Marcus gave them nothing. No outburst, no protest, just patience. His eyes lingered on the boarding pass in his hand. A simple rectangle of paper, flimsy to anyone else, but in this moment, it was a mirror. Not of his worth, but of theirs. How they saw him. How little they thought he belonged. Silence filled the cabin, but silence has weight. It pressed against the walls, against the passengers watching from every angle. A woman near the window whispered, "He hasn't even raised his voice." Her husband nodded, eyes narrowed on the attendant. Victoria tapped the armrest with manicured nails, an impatient rhythm meant to show control. "Why isn't security here yet?" she demanded. Her voice rose, but Marcus remained calm, almost serene. It wasn't the first time he'd been told he didn't belong. It wasn't the first time patience was mistaken for weakness. At 25, when a loan officer called him too much of a risk, despite perfect collateral, he had responded the same way: silence first, action later. At 32, when a partner laughed at his proposal before realizing he owned half the table, he had sat quiet until the laughter turned into apology. That silence became armor. And now it became theater, because the longer he waited, the more the cabin turned. People started to notice the imbalance. The boarding pass in his hand versus the contempt in Victoria's tone. His steady posture versus her dripping entitlement. The silence became the evidence. A teenage passenger, phone trembling in his grip, whispered, "This is wrong." The words weren't loud, but they traveled. Others shifted in their seats. The mood had cracked. Empathy was leaking through. Marcus finally spoke, not to argue, not to defend. Just 4 words, quiet but sharp enough to slice through every layer of doubt. "Run my name, properly." The attendant froze. Victoria scoffed. The banker laughed under his breath. But the cabin wasn't laughing. Not anymore. Marcus's voice stayed calm. "Check your system, then check yourself." Then silence again. Heavy, intolerable, powerful. And in that silence, the storm pressed closer. The silence didn't just hang in the cabin, it provoked it. Row by row, passengers started to shift. Heads turned. Phones tilted higher. The kind of collective stillness that meant something's wrong here. In row 6, a young man in a gray hoodie lifted his phone, thumb-tapping record. The red circle blinked alive. His whisper to the woman beside him was caught in the microphone. He hasn't even raised his voice. But they're treating him like a threat. Oh. 2 rows back, a teenager angled her camera between the seats, whispering, "This is insane." Her mother pressed a hand down on her wrist, then hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead. People need to see." Near the aisle, an older businessman lowered his newspaper slowly, eyes narrowing on Victoria Hale. He didn't raise his phone, but his stare was as cutting as any lens. The flight attendant noticed. "Please, no recordings," she said quickly, voice tight, "for security reasons." But the young man in row 6 spoke louder, for the first time. "Security reasons?" He showed you his ticket. His voice cracked but carried. Heads swiveled. The cabin air grew heavier, charged with recognition. Victoria Hale laughed. A sharp bark meant to dismiss the rising tide. "These people love to play victim. He's holding us all up." She turned toward the phones deliberately, her sunglasses catching their reflection. "You can record all you want. He doesn't belong here." The words echoed louder than she realized. Someone gasped. Someone muttered, "She said that out loud?" And suddenly, the divide wasn't just Marcus versus Victoria. It was Victoria versus the cabin. Marcus remained still, hands steady, boarding pass unwavering. He didn't reach for the cameras. He didn't need to. He had always believed words spoke louder than pixels. But one voice mattered more than the rest. From the jump seat near the galley, a young trainee flight attendant shifted nervously. Barely 22, her uniform still stiff, her name tag new. She had scanned Marcus's ticket herself. She knew it was real. Her eyes darted to the lead attendant, then to Victoria, then back to Marcus. Her throat tightened. She whispered under her breath, almost too low to hear, "He's right. 3 ampere is his." No one caught it except the passenger with the phone. The microphone picked up her words like a confession. The red light blinked brighter. The record went on. And in that moment, the cabin stopped being private. It became a courtroom. Witnesses were speaking, silently or otherwise, and the verdict was inching closer. Victoria tapped her armrest again, louder this time, desperate to drown it out. "You'll see. Horizon doesn't tolerate imposters. He'll be gone in minutes." But the passengers weren't convinced anymore. Their silence wasn't agreement. It was judgment. And Marcus knew. When silence shifts, the truth is no longer his alone. The lead flight attendant wasn't enough. Now the cabin manager stepped in. Tall, uniform pressed sharp, name tag glinting under fluorescent lights, Daniel Pierce, the purser of this flight. His arrival was supposed to signal authority, calm, order. Instead, it pressed the tension tighter. What seems to be the problem here? His tone was clipped, but he barely waited for an answer. His eyes landed on Victoria Hale first. Miss Hale, are you comfortable? We'll get this resolved. Marcus spoke evenly. My ticket is for 3 Ampere. You can check the manifest yourself. Daniel didn't glance at the paper in his hand. He glanced at the hoodie, the jeans, the calmness that he mistook for defiance. Sir, we've had issues with fraudulent boarding passes before. If you don't comply, you may be removed from the aircraft. Gasps rippled from the rows. The word fraudulent stung. Victoria crossed her legs again, satisfied. Thank you. Finally someone who understands. Get him out of here. He's wasting everyone's time. The banker chimed in, voice carrying like static. Exactly. He's trying to bluff his way into first class. Policy is policy. That word policy slid like a blade. It was the same excuse Marcus had heard at 22, 30, 35. Not rules, not law, just policy. Flexible enough to bend against him. The trainee attendant shifted in the galley, fists tightening at her sides. She'd seen the green scan, knew the system cleared his name. Her lips pressed together, but she said nothing yet. Fear kept her still. Daniel leaned closer to Marcus, voice lower now but dripping with authority. This is your final warning. Take a different seat, or I'll have security escort you out. Marcus's reply was calm, almost too calm for the weight of the moment. You are threatening to remove a paying passenger in favor of someone who simply says she belongs. The cabin heard it, the phones caught it, the judgment deepened. Victoria snapped. Because I do belong. My family has invested in Horizon for years. Do you even know who I am? She tilted her chin toward the passengers, daring them to challenge her. This airline wouldn't exist without people like me. Oh. The words fell heavy, arrogant, absolute. Some passengers shook their heads. A woman whispered to her son, "It's always the ones who think money makes them more human." Daniel ignored the ripple. He turned to the lead attendant, nodding once. Call ground security. Tell them we have a non-compliant passenger in first class. The cabin bristled. Phones rose higher. A murmur rolled like thunder down the rows. But Marcus didn't flinch. He had been here before. He had been called a fraud before. He had been told to leave places he rightfully owned before. And every time he remembered, silence first, then truth, then justice. This storm was still gathering, but it was coming. The standoff should have paused there, awaiting security, awaiting protocol. But arrogance doesn't wait. It lunges. Victoria Hale reached forward with sudden speed, plucking the boarding pass from Marcus's hand before the cabin manager could react. Gasps cracked through the aisle. For one suspended second, the flimsy paper held between her fingers like evidence, like truth. Then rip. She tore it clean down the middle, the sound sharp as thunder in the pressurized air. 2 halves fluttered toward the floor, weightless yet devastating. There, she announced, voice rising, dripping with triumph. Problem solved. He has no seat. Put him in economy, or better yet, off the plane. Phones surged upward. Every camera caught it. The sound, the movement, the smug tilt of her smile. Marcus didn't bend to pick up the scraps. He simply stared at her, calm as stone, as if daring her to believe paper defined his place. The cabin manager muttered, "Miss Hale," but she silenced him with a raised hand. "I'm protecting Horizon from fraud. You should be thanking me." Passengers erupted in whispers. Did she just rip his ticket? That's illegal. Oh my God. She actually did it. A woman in row 4 said it loud enough for the whole cabin. That was his boarding pass. You can't just erase someone like that. But Victoria thrived on the performance. She turned to the cameras, tilting her chin high. Post it. Show the world. They'll see I was right. The arrogance in her voice burned hotter than the fluorescent lights. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She wanted everyone to watch. The trainee attendant's breath hitched audibly, her eyes fixed on the torn halves at Marcus's feet. She knew the scan had been real. She knew the ticket was valid. Her hands shook at her sides, but fear locked her tongue. Daniel Pierce tried to regain control, his voice sharp. That's enough. Sir, without a valid boarding pass, you cannot remain in first class. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Valid had been torn in half, not by Marcus, but by the very woman now grinning in his seat. Marcus's silence cut deeper than protest. He stood there, still, unshaken, letting the cameras feast on the injustice. Victoria leaned back into the leather, with victory dripping from her smirk. See? Horizon protects its real clients. He's gone. The silence that followed wasn't compliance. It was judgment. Dozens of eyes, dozens of phones, all recording the moment she thought she had won. But storms don't break at the first crack. They gather. They circle. They wait. And Marcus Carter, he let the storm come. The torn paper lay on the floor like discarded evidence. To Victoria, it was victory. To the cabin crew, it was leverage. But to Marcus, it was fuel. He bent not to pick up the scraps, but to pull his phone from the pocket of his hoodie. Calm, deliberate, like someone adjusting his watch. A single gesture, yet it shifted the energy of the aisle. He placed an AirPod in his ear. Dialed one name. Rachel. The voice answered instantly. Crisp, efficient, like she had been waiting. Standing by. Marcus spoke low, but the cabin caught every word. Initiate protocol. Log incident. Pull Horizon seating records for Flight 623. Notify legal. Notify the board. Rachel didn't hesitate. Already in motion. Green light within 2 minutes. Cameras are rolling, we'll have full external coverage. Do you want investor logs pulled as well? His eyes flicked briefly to Victoria lounging in his seat. Her smirk hadn't faded. Yes, especially hers. The words landed like sparks in dry grass. A few passengers exchanged glances. Some didn't understand. Some did. Victoria scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Please, he's pretending. No one's listening to you. She looked around at the crew for affirmation. You're not really letting him make calls, are you? But the cabin manager hesitated. That hesitation was its own confession. Authority had begun to fracture. The young man in row 6 whispered into his phone. He just said notify the board. What does that mean? His video caught the moment. Marcus's calm expression never wavered. Rachel's voice flowed steady in Marcus's ear. System flags are live. The torn ticket is recorded. Victoria Hale's shareholder ID is pulled. Cross-referencing now. Victoria stiffened almost imperceptibly. Her sunglasses no longer shielded her expression. Marcus's voice carried, soft but unshakable. You don't erase people with paper. Not on my watch. Phones caught it, passengers murmured. A woman near the window whispered. He said, my watch. What does that mean? Her seatmate shook his head. Wait. Just wait. The air inside the cabin wasn't just tense anymore, it was electric. Something larger than a seat dispute was unfolding, and everyone knew it. Daniel Pierce, desperate to reclaim control, barked, Sir, calls must be terminated before takeoff. Put your phone away now. Marcus ignored him. He kept his voice even, directed only at the AirPod. Rachel. Confirm when the board is looped in. 30 seconds, came the reply. They'll have everything. Seating log. Video proof. Investor misconduct. Victoria's smirk faltered. Her nails stopped tapping the armrest. Her certainty cracked. And Marcus, calm, steady, immovable, let the silence swallow her. Because this wasn't silence anymore. This was strategy. This was the beginning of the turn. The cabin waited, balanced on a knife's edge. Phones up, eyes locked. Every breath suspended between disbelief and inevitability. Rachel's voice clicked back into Marcus's ear, clear as thunder. Board is live. Logs are secured. Investor records pulled. You have full authority. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply slipped the phone back into his pocket, like a man returning a weapon to its sheath. Then he looked around at Victoria, sprawled in his seat. At Daniel Pierce, stiff with false authority. At the passengers frozen in their own shock. My name, Marcus said, calm but sharp enough to cut, is Marcus Carter. Silence followed, heavier than the engine hum. A few passengers blinked in recognition. Others frowned, trying to place the name. Marcus continued, his words paced, deliberate, impossible to ignore. I am CEO of Horizon Airlines, 25% owner. The seat you tore up, Miss Hale, was mine, paid in full. Recorded in the system you thought you could erase. The sentence detonated in the cabin. Gasps scattered through the rows. The young man in row 6 nearly dropped his phone. The teenager whispered, "Wait, the CEO?" Her mother whispered back, "Oh my God, he owns the airline." Victoria's smirk vanished, replaced by a thin line of disbelief. She stammered, half rising from the seat. "That's impossible. You know you're lying." But Marcus didn't need to convince her. The cabin itself had shifted. Dozens of witnesses, dozens of cameras, and every single one had caught her arrogance, now flipped into humiliation. Daniel's face drained of color. "Sir, Mr. Carter, if I had known—" Marcus cut him off with a glance. "Not loud, not harsh, just absolute. You didn't need to know my name to treat me with dignity." The words landed like verdicts. Phones caught every syllable. Victoria tried again, desperate now. My family has invested in Horizon for years. My seat, my shares." Marcus's eyes locked on hers. Calm, steady, inevitable. "You may hold 2%. I hold 25. And today, you tried to erase me on my own plane." The cabin erupted not with chaos, but with the kind of murmurs that ripple when power shifts. Applause began in the back row, hesitant at first, then stronger. A woman clapped once, hard, and others followed. The sound rose, wave after wave, until the air itself seemed to turn against Victoria. She sank back into the seat, as though leather could shield her. But it couldn't. Not from the cameras, not from the truth. Marcus didn't bask in the applause. He didn't need to. He only sat down in 3 Ampere, reclaiming the seat that had always been his, and let the storm turn on those who had started it. Because the reveal wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of their reckoning. The ripple became a wave. Applause cracked through the cabin like sudden thunder. Some passengers clapped slow, deliberate, others loud and furious. The phones didn't lower, they rose higher, catching every angle, every flinch, every fragment of downfall. Victoria Hale shrank into 3 Ampere as if the leather could swallow her whole. Her sunglasses no longer masked her. Her face was pale, jaw tight, panic leaking through cracks and arrogance. She tried to speak something about misunderstanding, about just protecting Horizon, but the words tangled in her throat. Daniel Pierce, the cabin manager, stood frozen, authority gone, posture collapsing. He had barked orders minutes ago. Now he stared at the man he'd nearly ejected, realizing the weight of his mistake. His clipboard trembled in his hand. The lead flight attendant swallowed hard, eyes darting to passengers filming her every move. Her earlier dismissal, fraudulent ticket now echoed back like an indictment. She fumbled with her radio but didn't dare speak. From the back, a woman called out, "You saw his ticket. We all did." Another voice followed, louder, angrier. "You ripped it in half and called him a fraud." Every accusation wasn't just aimed at Victoria, it hit the crew as well. And the cabin, now jury and judge, wasn't holding back. The young trainee attendant stepped forward from the galley, face flushed but voice firm. "His ticket scanned green. I saw it. I logged it." Her declaration cut the air like a blade. For the first time, she didn't look at Marcus, she looked at the passengers. "They ignored it." Gasps broke again, sharper, heavier. The betrayal was undeniable now. Phones caught every word. One passenger shouted, "Say it louder." Another chanted, "Truth, truth," and others joined. Victoria buried her face in her hand, muttering, "This is out of control." But it wasn't just out of control, it was out of her control. The banker who had mocked Marcus earlier leaned back, suddenly very small in his expensive suit. He pulled his phone down, pretending he hadn't laughed, pretending he hadn't joined the humiliation. But cameras already had him too. The storm Marcus had waited for was here. The murmurs weren't whispers anymore, they were fury. Discrimination, abuse of power. Kick them out, not him. Every eye turned, not to Marcus, but to the crew who had sided with arrogance over evidence. Every lens recorded their paling faces, their trembling hands. And Marcus? He sat still in 3 Ampere, posture calm, hands folded. He didn't need to clap. He didn't need to shout. The cabin had taken his silence, and turned it into fire. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it lets others see for themselves. And now they had. The applause faded into murmurs. Then silence. The kind of silence that waits for judgment. All eyes turned to Marcus. He didn't rise. He didn't shout. He simply reached for his phone again. A small gesture that sent another tremor through the crew. "Rachel," he said, his voice even, steady, carrying through the cabin. Effective, immediately suspend the crew involved. Access revoked. Incident logged for board review. Rachel's reply was crisp, audible enough to echo in the hush. Confirmed. Crew credentials frozen. Legal has the footage. The lead attendant's tablet buzzed in her hand. She glanced down, color draining from her face. The Horizon system flashed red access denied. The authority she had wielded minutes earlier evaporated in a single second. Daniel Pierce's radio clicked uselessly. Locked. Dead. His posture sagged, shoulders folding inward like the weight of the cabin's eyes had crushed him. Whispers cascaded. "They're suspended right now." "He just shut them out. This is unbelievable." Marcus's gaze shifted to Victoria Hale. She sat rigid, pearls trembling against her neck. For once, she had no smirk, no defense. "As for you," Marcus said, voice calm but cutting, "Horizon has no place for investors who humiliate passengers, falsify authority, and tear up boarding passes to feed their ego." Gasps erupted. Phones zoomed in. "Rachel," Marcus continued, never looking away from Victoria, "initiate buyback. Effective immediately. Horizon will reclaim her minority shares. Record the forfeiture for the board." The command landed like a verdict. Rachel's voice returned, sharp, certain. "Confirmed. Hale investment flagged. Board notified. Transaction in process." Victoria jolted upright. You can't do that. My family, our shares." Marcus's eyes didn't blink. 2% doesn't outweigh 25. And it doesn't outweigh dignity. Your influence ends here. The words echoed through the cabin like a gavel striking wood. Passengers erupted, some clapping, some shouting yes. Others filmed with renewed fervor, already imagining headlines. "Investor loses shares mid-flight after humiliating CEO." Victoria sank back, pale, stunned, powerless. Her earlier arrogance dissolved into a silence heavier than shame. Marcus didn't linger on her. He looked around the cabin. At the phones, the witnesses, the passengers who had watched everything unfold. "Let this be clear," he said. "Policy does not excuse prejudice. Authority does not excuse humiliation. On my airline, justice will always fly higher than arrogance." Applause thundered. It wasn't polite anymore. It was cathartic, fierce, unrestrained. The cabin itself seemed to vibrate with vindication. And Marcus Carter sat still in 3 Ampere, not triumphant, not boastful, just resolute. The reckoning had landed. The roar of applause rose, peaked, then softened into something heavier respect. Marcus Carter leaned back into 3 Ampere at last. The seat that had been questioned, contested, ripped from his hand, now embraced him like it always should have. He fastened the belt slowly, deliberately, as if to show the entire cabin. "I belong, and I always did." Phones still hovered, eyes still fixed. But Marcus didn't perform for them. He spoke for something deeper. "The real turbulence," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "isn't outside this plane. It's in here, in how we decide who belongs and who doesn't, in how we let arrogance masquerade as authority." The words landed harder than any engine's roar. A hush swept over the cabin, passengers absorbing each syllable like verdicts. "Injustice doesn't always scream," Marcus continued. "Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it wears pearls. Sometimes it hides behind policy. But today you all saw it stripped bare." A woman near the back wiped a tear. A man in the aisle seat whispered, "He's right." Even the teenager who had been recording lowered her phone, not out of disinterest, but out of awe. Marcus's gaze swept slowly across the cabin, not accusatory, not triumphant, simply resolute. "This isn't about me. It's about every person who has ever been told, you don't belong. Every person who's had to prove what should never have been questioned. That ends here. Not just for me, but for all of us." Applause broke again this time, not just thunderous, but unified. Passengers rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some shouting, "Yes!" others simply nodding, the kind of nod that carries centuries of recognition. Victoria Hale sat small in the middle of it all, drowned by the very voices she thought would side with her. Her power had evaporated, her influence stripped, her arrogance silenced. The suspended crew avoided his eyes, staring at their useless tablets, at the floor, at anything but the man they had doubted. Marcus adjusted his seat, gaze still steady. On Horizon Airlines, prejudice will never fly again. Not while I'm at the helm. The cabin erupted one final time. Not chaos celebration. A chorus of relief, vindication, justice. The plane hadn't left the ground, but something larger had lifted, the weight of silence. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. Not victory, not ego, just truth. Because justice, when it lands, doesn't need to shout, it only needs to stand. And Marcus Carter was standing anchored in dignity, seated in his rightful place, carrying an entire cabin's faith that prejudice could be grounded, one flight at a time.